Okay, so Olu, we're going to be discussing, I'm going to just share with the listeners today, just some statistics again and definition for those that haven't heard the definition and the statistics locally in Nottinghamshire. I'm just going to share that information as a first point for us to start these discussions, just to give content and clarity around what we're discussing today. So gender domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a gender crime which is deeply rooted in societal inequality between men and women. It is a form of gender-based violence that's directed against women because she's a woman, or that affects disproportionately. So we know, don't we, Olu, that when it comes to domestic abuse and domestic violence, it also affects men. Yes. Women, though, are more likely than men to experience multiple incidents of abuse, different types of domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, which is what we're going to be talking about today, sexual abuse, sexual violence, stalking, another subject that is, it's very grim when somebody is subjected to stalking, and in particular, sexual violence. Any woman can experience domestic abuse regardless of their race, ethnicity, religious group, sexuality, class, or disability. But some women can experience other forms of oppression and discrimination. They may face further barriers in terms of disclosing abuse and finding help. But we're here to help those that are listening today and point you in the right direction. Domestic abuse exists as part of violence against, it's called the VAWG violence. If you see VAWG anywhere, it's the acronym for violence against women and girls. It also includes family violence, as I said, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, which is also the acronym FGM, and HBV, which is honor-based violence, honor-based crimes. Okay, so we know that, just as a reminder, that sometimes when we think about domestic abuse and domestic violence, we tend to think about intimate partners, those that are married, that are in intimate relationships. But just a reminder that domestic abuse can also affect family members. So the in-laws against an individual within the family as an in-law, or it could be that the child, which we're hearing so much more about and having more discussions around child-parent violence, which is really, really sad. And we talked about it, didn't we, Olu? How harrowing it must be when your child becomes abusive to you, becomes physically abusive to you. Just recently, in terms of that, I'm just going with my train of thought at the moment, that I'm aware of an individual where their child, without giving too much information, where their child didn't just hit them once, they repeatedly hit them. And in the end, what they needed to do, what happened was that they had to, it was a male against, so it was a son against a father. He didn't just hit his father once, he repeatedly hit him with a weapon. And in the end, he had to run out of his home and ask a neighbor to help him. When he arrived at the neighbor's property, Olu, he was covered in blood because he had repeatedly hit his father. Never before had his father experienced any type of abuse from his son. But he really, really laid into him. He ended up in hospital and had multiple stitches because of it. So it's a real issue. And, children can be abusive in so many different ways. They can be financially abusive. They can be, unfortunately, sexually abusive. And they can be physically and verbally abusive. Don't suffer because it's your child that's abusing you. Reach out. And as Olu says every week, behind the screens. Seek help. Seek help if you're in that situation. So that was the definition. So in terms of Nottinghamshire, 20,464 people in Nottinghamshire will have experienced domestic abuse in the last 12 months. Okay. 20,464. 79,362 people will have experienced domestic abuse over their lifetime. That's 56,756 women. And this is quite reassuring that we do validate and have an understanding that men also suffer, because we tend to say,
absolutely,
men tend to say, you know, you're always talking about women, 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 but 22,606 men in Nottinghamshire, in the area of which the listeners are listening from today, where we're based in terms of Radio Faza,
yeah.
22,606 men suffer from domestic abuse, have suffered within their lifetime. Now, in terms of that, the reason why the numbers are so big, Olu, in terms of the ratio of men and women, is because men tend to leave the relationships quite early on. Women tend to stay in the relationships for various reasons, which maybe later on, maybe next week we can look at that. I don't know. Okay. You know, why women don't leave the relationship. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, so we know that domestic abuse is rife in every area globally as well. And we mustn't forget the children. Children will be affected by domestic abuse. Approximately 75% of children living in households where domestic abuse occurs are exposed to the actual incidents. So they're actually witnessing dad or mum being abusive. And this also includes them actually being part of it in some situations. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean that sometimes the perpetrator, the abuser, may say, kick her, hit her, spit at her, or start calling her names. The child then becomes disrespectful and loses respect for the... Yeah, it's really sad, isn't it, Olu? It's really, really sad. So yes, so each day, Ulu, 1,639 women are sexually assaulted.
Daily.
Each day, 1,639 women are sexually assaulted. 98% are raped or sexually assaulted by penetration. Victims report that the perpetrators are male. It has been reported that calls to domestic abuse helplines in England is up by 60% over the past year. Yeah.
That tells you how relevant this show is and the relevance of us coming on the air. Because for an average person going about his or her business, you wouldn't know that there's such a huge statistics of harms being done in our communities, isn't it? I mean, this statistics is quite staggering, and it's very, 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 very unfortunate that this happens on daily basis. Even the daily statistics is alarming, to be honest.
What is consent and what is it not? In England and Wales, the legal definition for consent is in section 74 of the Sexual Offence Act 2003. It states that a person's consent, if he agrees or she agrees by choice and has the freedom and capacity to make that choice. freedom and capacity to make that choice. The definition is integral to the main sexual offence, such as rape and sexual assault. There must be a lack of consent by the complainant, the person that said what you did, I didn't consent to, yeah? And a lack of reasonable belief in terms of the consent of the offender. So what does that mean? As much as that might sound confusing, in terms of clarity around consent, lack of consent by the victim, and reasonable belief that the perpetrator, the offender, believed that they had consent. What is consent? Consent is, did the other party agree to intimacy? Did they say yes? Now, something in terms of, if I'm sharing information around, demystifying what consent is, I remember in my training, what I was informed of, and I in turn impart, that consent, if you say yes at, let's just say that you're at the park or you're somewhere else and you've gone to dinner or something like that, and you've both kind of alluded to the fact that you're anticipating that you're going to be intimate. Ulu, can I ask you the question, at any point, do you feel, regardless of the fact that, you could be thinking, yep, we're gonna be intimate, you and this person, and at any point you think to yourself, actually, I don't want to do this. Go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
The moment there's a change of mind, that has to be respected, irrespective of what transpired between these two before that moment. The moment there is a change of mind, then the last wish has to be respected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be communicated in various ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal.
Right.
But I think, I know we're going to be talking about communication maybe later on, but how do you communicate your needs and what your likes and your dislikes, and stop, even though it's somebody that somebody that you've been intimate with, your partner, your husband, your wife? How do you then articulate that? Because I think, when we think about it, some people might feel uncomfortable about, say, because they've consented 5 minutes ago, 5 minutes later, they've changed their mind. They might feel a bit uncomfortable, but, I was kind of leading them on into this situation because that's what I thought I wanted. But I've now decided that I don't want to be intimate anymore. So then you should be able to articulate that, to express that, to share, communicate that you no longer would like to be intimate with this person. Because I say that 5 minutes ago, because literally, and I say this especially to parents, tell our sons, our young men, that they should keep checking in. Keep checking in. Are you okay? Are you comfortable? Are you okay? Because if that is not done, unfortunately, because of miscommunication, that they could end up being arrested because at some point that other person decided they didn't want to go any further with the intimacy. So yeah, it's a real kind of discussion point, I think, that we should be holding with, no taboo subjects. I always say that, no taboo subjects. Where there's taboo subjects, there is hidden harm. Let's talk about these things with our family members and articulate our needs and our dislikes. So sexual violence can include, pressure or forcing someone to do something sexually, which I just said. So how about we look at touching someone in a sexual way without their permission? Now, we kind of talked about this last week. What does that look like? When I say, you know, touching someone sexually without their permission, and I say this to say and drilling down on it, is because, again, some people might, what they think is acceptable is actually sexually assaulting somebody because they haven't given you permission to touch them. So, you know, although we're talking about domestic, which includes family members, intimate partners, married people that are married, outside of that, there's sexual abuse. As we know, sexual assault and rape still happens. And as a female, if I can say this, not being sexist, because I'm sure it happens to men, and you might be able to shed some light on this.
Yes, yes.
But in terms of touching someone in a sexual way without permission, as a woman, sometimes I think men do overstep their boundaries. Yeah. Maybe they think it's innocent, but in terms of how it's received, it may not be deemed as innocent, but quite intrusive for the other party. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
So it could be, you know, the way that somebody's held, you know, they might be held inappropriately. So for example, as a female, and men that are listening, you might be inclined to hold a female around her waist instead of touching maybe her shoulder, for example. But you might put your arm around her waist. You might hold her too tightly, but you're not aware, the male may not be aware, or the female might not be aware of the internal emotions and effects that is having on that individual, because they haven't invited them to touch them. Boundaries are broken, I believe, all the time. And what is deemed as being innocent may not be so innocent, because you don't know the impact that it's having on that individual. Yeah. What say you, Olu? What say you? What do you say about this?
Yeah. Just as you said, you may be thinking you're doing something normal, and yet you are being intrusive innocently. And in the eye of the law, you are not innocent. That's why you don't make assumptions. Yeah.